Hello and welcome to round one with Jeskai Flash. So to start off, we are on the draw, and pretty much the easiest key possible. We just have Snapcaster lands good spells to interact with regardless of what our opponent's doing. Our opponent's going to lead on a turn one basic mountain, which uh, kind of implies, at least at this point, I think, Scred Red over Burn, especially because there was no creature associated with it. And realistically, this hand's not going to do a lot against like a turn 2 Simian Spirit Guided Moon. So there's not a lot of playing around anything that we can do. So just play the obvious tapped land, pass the turn. Opponent plays an island and passes back. We're just going to take the 2 damage because we want to. Against the island, it implies combo or some control matchup where the life total is not going to be super huge, and I want to fire off the Helix so that I can resolve a Snapcaster Mage as an early threat here. So my goal is to be able to stick a Snapcaster on 4 and then use the Lightning Helix for extra damage to up my clock. Also, the Helix helps regain some of the damage dealt there. So our opponent misses a land. I just fire the Helix. I don't care if it gets countered. I don't really care at all. And so we drew the ETB tapped land. I didn't want to save it for click with negate back. And I wanted to try and fight over click before resolving a Snapcaster Mage. I'm not entirely sure on that, but it's worth thinking about in... Yeah, let me know what you think about that. If I should have played the Colonnade to try and set up for a earlier Snapcaster, it's possible the Snapcaster is the better threat to run out first because it's a little more obnoxious to counter into open mana, and also just like matters a little less, the first one at least, because it's just flashing back Helix. So we didn't upkeep or draw a step to click because we want to negate certain spells like Blood Moon, and then we can click whatever's left if we get an end step click. Then we see click die to bolt. Fine, kind of expected. This hand, so I don't really care about the Madcap because I have a path for the eventual big dork Empyrean. The options are, so I don't really care. Blood Moon's going to be obnoxious, but I have a negate for it. I end up taking the Snap here because it's just the most raw powerful card in these blue mirrors. My opponent's eventually going to get to Leak plus Moon, but I feel like given they missed a land drop, I have a land in hand. The odds of me getting to negate plus pay for Leak first are much higher. So I decide to play the untapped land. It's debatable, but I like fetching the basic planes here so that there's a chance I just don't even have to counter Blood Moon. I don't want to mess around. Like, if I draw an island next turn after fetching the planes, there's like a real chance that I just don't care about Moon. And here, I don't really want to fire the Snapcaster into Mana Leak, so I can wait. And that's the real argument for playing the Celestial there, is that I'm not actually going to fire the Snap into a Leak. And now it's... The other thing is it's kind of awkward now. If my opponent goes land, Moon, I'm going to get Mana Leaked. But they've only drawn 1 land in their 3 draw steps to hit it, so... Or 3? Yeah. And now we're in position to fire off a Snapcaster if needed. By if needed, I mean I'm going to become the beatdown as fast as possible. My opponent opts to trade a Mana Leak for this Helix, which I'm absolutely okay with. Because my plan is just to beat down with Snapcaster. Drawing another Vendilion is huge here. Just like another threat that I can expose is really important. I think I thought about this at this point. I think I was supposed to Vendilion in response to the fetch, because I have leak mana up. I don't think 3 versus 2 is that big a deal, but I could tag something like an Electrolyze and still leave up a negate. So responding to Moon, I fire a click at my opponent. I take the Dispel. The hand was Cryptic, Madcap, Platinum, Dispel, and blanking on the last card. Cryptic, Flame Slash. There we go, that we knew about. So our opponent's just got like not a lot going on. We can take the Dispel and then negate the Blood Moon, keep our mana operating, and more importantly, keep our 2 Celestial Colonnades attacking later in the game. So we're now going to resolve this negate, barring a untap or a draw off the click that goes very poorly for us, which it didn't. Click gets flame slashed as expected. Now we're going to draw another lightning bolt, which makes me want to just aggro my opponent into burn range. We also, this is, so the one thing worth noting here is that we have path plus snap path, which means that we're basically sure to break a madcap skills up, or a madcap experiment. So I'm not super afraid of doing this. Snapcaster gets bolted down. We go to untap for the path because we, don't want to get spell pierced or whatever. We draw land. I actually don't know about that untap on path. I guess if I care about playing into spell pierce, I could just attack with the celestial and then path the platinum before damage. So the decision of EOT versus untap is, yeah, I should have just EOT'd it into this, with the logic being that if it gets countered, I can snap it back. Though I guess then so I know my opponent has the Empyrean. That was the issue. So I want to resolve my path through any soft counter so that I can path the next Empyrean. And then at that point, there's only usually 2 Platinum Empyreans in these archetypes. So once I've gotten rid of the first 2, I'm pretty clear to not need another path. And now we just put our opponent into Lightning Bolt range, which is pretty safe. Especially if they tap out, we have the answer, which we do, so we end up just going path, win the game. Okay, our post-board configuration. So we took out Helix's, Bolt, and 2 Spell Queller. The logic being that Spell Queller is kind of an awkward threat against Lightning Bolt decks. Kind of clunky, kind of a liability that you have to protect in weird spots. It's easy for them to like create counter fights effectively that you don't want to become part of because of it. We've got the Helixes out and the Bolts out because they don't have a lot of targets for those. And we sideboarded into a bunch of blue magic, Dispel, Negates, Visions, and a additional Blade Splicer. I didn't want the 4th Blade Splicer, but I do want another threat. I debated the Spell Pierce, but I felt like these games might go long, so I didn't really want to have an extra spell that clunks it up. And Path can be used on my own Snapcaster mages to break out Blood Moon effectively, so I was cool with leaving that card in. So game 2 here, we're on the draw. Pretty clear keep. We have a basic 2 Serum Visions to find fetch lands. Opponent Serum Visions, great. We Serum Vision right back. We're using this because we've sideboarded down to so few red cards that I don't actually care about getting a red mana with it, or even a white mana because I'm trying to find a specific white mana, which is the basic. I end up bottoming both of these. Neither of them is the basic planes I want, even though both of them might have utility. I just don't really want to go down that road with either of them. They're just like potential utility instead of like literally the card I want. Here I opt to slow roll the Visions. I put up the best show of strength I can have here because my hand is so bad against my opponent just jamming Blood Moon into me. So I play the second basic that matters, and I leave up the 2 mana so that they are afraid of casting Blood Moon here. So I have a potential extra turn, extra Serum Visions to set up finding my basic planes. So I play my tap land, same exact thing. Just leave up my 2 mana. See how long I can strong arm my way in. Electrolyze, sure, take it, don't care. Nice cycler. Opponent does nothing. So I realized after casting the Serum Vision that I should have just played my land first so I could Spell Queller or Mana Leak. Because Mana Leak's one of the cards that's the most awkward to deal with on a spell, or to break a Spell Queller out of. It's kind of a little more timing dependent. I keep both of the threats, and here's where I think I make a mistake by suspending Ancestral Vision. I think I was supposed to just leave up Spell Queller. Opponent just runs out the moon, and I'm no longer playing the game. I main phase the Vendilion, so I can resolve the threat for sure around whatever. I see the following hand. Peeing Huron is the most obnoxious card of my opponent's hand, but I felt like I had to take the Lightning Bolt at this time so I can ride the click to victory, especially because I have so many bolts to clear out Thopters. My opponent madcaps into a Empyrean. No point in doing anything. I snap Visions. And here's where I make my other mistake. I know about the answer. I should not have done this. I lost some time to disconnect real fast here. And I should have done multiple things here wrong. I should have waited a turn so I could fight back on the Counterspell War. But also, I should have bolted before blocks, because it forces the counter out of my opponent's hand if they don't have an instant speed removal spell. It also lets me fight the turn before Vision resolves, so I get to... There's a lot of things wrong about that. Fighting the turn before Vision resolves is great. Fighting when I have open mana up is great. And so Vision resolves after a bit of a counter war. But I don't find the basic planes I need to find. So, game 3. Re-sideboarding a little bit here. So, for game 3... I opted to sideboard out those 2 Lightning Bolts that I don't think really do anything here. And instead, I opted for an additional Spell Queller and the Spell Pierce. The Spell Pierce helps me fight over early Blood Moons, giving me 3 counterspells that can fight over those early, plus the Spell Quellers. Good enough for me. Okay, let's hop on into game 3 here. So we are on the play. Pretty obvious keep. We effectively have 2 basics, a counter for an early moon, threats that we can protect. Playing the tap lands first because very specifically I want to be able to have the 4th land I play come into play, enter the battlefield untapped for Spell Pierce plus Click or Spell Pierce plus Queller. I don't really care about getting one of these fetches out under Moon because I have protection against Moon here. Here, because of Spell Pierce, I don't really want to move on the Vendilion Click, by the way. I'd rather counter something that tries to do something about it. And now that my opponent's missed a land, I could potentially counter a Mana Leak that has something to do with it. So I fetch first here. It's not super relevant. Note that there's literally no red spells in my deck, so I just fetch all blue-white lands. I just always like to have the mana up and not like get my fetch responded to with something silly here. Click my opponent. They try to electrolyze. I Spell Pierce back and get a pretty big tempo advantage. And I see the following hand. So we have negate, Snapcaster Mage, dead card, Pia, Izzet, and Bolt. Pia is the best card, but I have Cryptic to punish Pia, so I don't really care about it. What I really care about is Lightning Bolt to punish my Spell Queller. So I'm going to take that. Clear the way as much as possible. And so here I want to use this so that I can fetch my third island, and then just have all of my spells active through a Blood Moon and just not care about anything. Again, no red spells, no need to do anything about that. So this is a bit of a subtle mistake here. I should have tapped the Celestials to cast this so that I could just leave up the second Queller through a Blood Moon and not care. Not be forced to take action because of Blood Moon, but I'm clearly trying to Queller that spell. I just don't care about it. Resolving. I just want to advance my board. My opponent has a negate, which is a huge draw to Spell Queller, actually, is that it can't be negated when negates one of the better cards otherwise in these matchups. Just having a hard counter like that usually is good protection. In this case, it's not. And I'm going to make a slight misplay here. So my opponent plays Snapcaster and flashes back Electrolyze. And I forget that Snapcaster versus Spell Queller doesn't work the same way as Remand. I think it's possible I should have Spell Quellered the Snapcaster. So the way this works, because the card would go to the exiled zone. So with Remand, the card is replacing going to their hand with, or leaving this, going anywhere but the exiled zone with going to the exiled zone. But because it's being exiled by both effects here, it's just put on the Spell Queller. It's like which one apply. I forget the exact technicality that it works under. But if the Spell Queller dies, if it's exiling a flashback spell, the flashback spell can be cast because it doesn't replace. That's what it is. You can't replace something with the same thing. So it's being exiled, and it can't replace being exiled with being exiled because it's the same thing. So my opponent would, if they killed the Spell Queller, be able to Electrolyze. So it's possible I should have just fired on the Snapcaster, but at the same time, they get to tap. I get them to tap some mana, so I don't actually know which one was better or worse. So here we get to put our opponent down to 1 on this combat step, which I think basically makes it impossible for them to handle all of our threats at once, especially because you can't. Neither of these Spell Quellers let you really chain kill them, and then you also have to answer the Celestial. So from there, we pretty easily win the game.